start. So what are we doing? We're doing our... Did I close Solidworks? I must have. All right, so this is lesson 2 for our Automata project. What you guys are going to do for Friday, for the video, not for you guys who are sitting here, is make one of these. So this is a box that's supposed to be laser cut out and assembled to showcase the mechanism for driving an automata sculpture. And the cool thing about this model, or I guess one cool thing about this model, is that we're using something that we call a master sketch, so that we can update dimensions very simply and easily, and everything about this model updates with it, including the spacing of all of these different parts. So rather than dive back through and work sort of backwards through this model, I'm just going to start a brand new one, and you guys can follow along. Really wish there was a chair. Nah. Okay, so I'm going to start with my master sketch on the front plane, and the requirements for this box are to make it 100 by 100 by 300 millimeters. Yeah, we always work in millimeters. I am going to just place the origin in the center of my box here. I just added a midpoint relation. I'm going to start with just my basic dimensions here. So we have 300 millimeters wide, 100 millimeters tall. Hopefully you guys are still with me on all of that. All right, because this box is going to be made out of, I guess, pieces of material that actually have thickness, and because we're dimensioning this box from the outside, I want to put in my master sketch a representation of the thickness of this material. So there are a couple ways that I can do this. I could actually draw a box on the inside here and dimension it, or, and I'm actually going to use a faster thing, I can offset this box, and I'm going to reverse my offset so it's offsetting to the inside, and we're going to assume that our material is a 1/4 inch plywood. So I can actually write like 1/4 inch, and it will update it to be millimeters, so 6.35 millimeters. And I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. You'll notice that if I change this dimension later, because let's say I'm using 1/8 inch material instead of 1/4 inch material, I can just go in here, type in 1/8 inch, and it will update. It'll be in the video. Yeah. So I just did an offset. That's a great way to get like a nice consistent offset of geometry, like a box. So I'm going to go back in here to my offset and change it back to a 1/4 inch. Okay. So that's a couple of the parts here. The next thing that's going to be important in this model is, because we know we want to have these like little finger joints. Is that what it's called, a finger joint? Okay. These little finger joints around the edges of my box. I want to mock that stuff up in here too. And there are a couple ways that we can do this. And there's a neat technique. There are a couple ways that you can make this update and keep spacing the same. I'll show you the way that I did it. For the sake of time, I'm just going to do a few of these as opposed to like 12, 13, 15 different little finger joints. That's something, using the same technique, you guys could do a bunch of these. So I'm just going to arbitrarily place a couple of vertical lines in here right now. Sure, 4. Let's do 5. Why not? And I'm also going to do that on this side. And notice I'm like clicking the line tool in between each one because I don't want this like in between line to happen. You can also press the L key to reselect the line tool. Or right click. Yeah, there's like 10 different ways to reselect tools. They all work. Okay, so I've got a bunch of lines, and because I want them to be evenly spaced, I could do something like add a dimension between the outside and wherever this line is, and say I want that to be 300 millimeters divided by, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. That's one way to do it. The problem with doing it that way is if I change my dimension down here to something else, like make it a smaller box, this dimension won't update. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. There are a couple ways we could do this. We could do it an equation-driven dimension, or we can use some other construction. And I'm going to do both of those things so you can see how it might work. The easy way, in my opinion, would be to use some construction lines. So I'm going to make some lines. Actually, I could go the other way too. Just from like the center point of one of these little dividers to the center point of another divider. I'm just going to make a bunch of these lines and go all the way across the entire width of my box here, right? Then I can select all of these. So I'm holding shift so that I can select all of these little construction lines. And I'm going to add an equal, make equal relation. And it, boom, automatically snaps all of these lines so that they're always equidistant. And even if I update this dimension and make it something else, it keeps all of those parts evenly spaced, right? That is like the driving feature of this sketch that will let my finger joints eventually update regardless of how I change the dimensions of my box. You guys with me so far? Okay. I know I'm kind of like walking through this pretty quick, but you'll have a video here, and I don't want to keep you here for like 4 extra hours. Okay, what's the other way we could do it? I said something about like an equation, like an equation-driven dimension. Okay, so I'll show you that too. Let's say I'm going to add a dimension here, and I always want the space between this line and the outside of my box to be, let's see, I'm going to have like 1, 2, 3, 4 different sections. So I want it to be a quarter, a fourth of this dimension. I can actually click that dimension. Oops, sorry, I did it backwards. Let me get out of here. Darn it, got ahead of myself. Let's start over. Add a dimension between the line and the outside. Put it over here. I'm going to say equals, actually type in equals, pick this dimension, and then say divided by 4. And press enter, or green check box. Okay, so notice if I change this to like 75, my dimension changes as well, right? It's accomplishing the same thing as these little like sketch relation lines. You can do either one. Doing the dimensions might leave your sketch a little more clean, but you're going to have more numbers. For this particular project, I don't think it really matters. What you are going to have to do, though, is add a couple more dimensions for all of these other spaces. And I could say equals 100 divided by 4 again, or I could say equals this dimension that we know is going to update, because we know we want it to be the same, right? So let me drag this guy up. I'm going to add another dimension here. Say equals that same dimension as before, and what we should have are 1, 2, 3 evenly spaced lines, and what, 5 different lines on the top. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. But we're not all the way there yet. So we've got lines on the top and on the side, and we need some on the bottom and on this other side. So any ideas on how I might get those lines to go in another spot? A couple different ways to do it, as always in Solidworks. Well, I could just redraw them and use relations to like make sure everything's collinear. I think an easier way to do it would be to mirror those lines over. So I'm going to draw in a couple of mirroring axes through like the middle of my part, and I'm going to do a mirror entities feature. So I'm going to say which entities do I want to mirror? That line, and that line, and I want it to mirror across this vertical line. There we go. Now I have them on the other side, and I can do the same thing on the top, and that is what I'm going to do. So it's funny because if you look at the part that I was just showing you, I didn't actually do it this way, and now that I'm building it a second time, I'm like, oh yeah, this would be even faster. So I guess a side note about parts and building. Oh, we got like crazy stuff happening, so I'm going to undo that. I might have picked something that I didn't mean to pick. And actually, I am going to save this really quick too. when your model blows up and it dies and you didn't save, you have a chance to rebuild, and usually you'll find things that you didn't think of the first time through that'll make your life easier for the second time. So this is demo model 2, save, okay. So I'm gonna go back in the sketch and, you know, why don't I show you another way to do this? You could draw a bunch of other lines, and just because I don't want to like reselect that line tool, how many do I need? 5? That is 5. I'm going to come back through and just like get rid of these construction lines. Oops, not that one. And then how do I line them up? I'm going to just pick this line, shift, pick the line above it, and make them collinear, and it lines everything up. You will get this little like dotted line going through the middle. Yeah, Eunice, you have a question.
Would it work if you like drew the lines like through both of them and then like power?
Yeah, you absolutely could.
Would the dimensions still?
Depends. Sometimes it would, sometimes it wouldn't. I actually tried that in my other model. The question was, could you draw a line through everything, do your whole dimensioning like with this, you know, some, what is it, equation-driven dimensioning, or using like these little construction lines, trim everything away, and then have the dimensions work on both sides. I would say you could try it. It didn't work for me. Sometimes when you trim stuff, it does get rid of that dimensional relationship. It's certainly something you could add back in with another relation, though. So yeah, but right, and probably if we thought about it, we could probably, you know, find 4 or 5 other ways to do the same exact thing. And if we talk to some engineer who's been doing SolidWorks for his entire life or her entire life, they would say, no, you're doing this all wrong. You should do it this other way. Doesn't matter. Whatever works. All right, so I'm going to add all these collinear. Collinear, yes. Sometimes that little contextual menu pops up, and it's even easier than like picking it from the side. SolidWorks always has a million ways for you to do stuff. Optimists will see it as a plus. Okay, so there's my sketch. I am going to get out of this sketch, and because it's a master sketch, this is just a personal preference. I like to label these as such. So master, this is my front sketch about the box. Okay, cool. Something that makes it easy for me to remember what I put in that sketch, and makes it easier for whoever I'm working with on this part file, like an engineer or another designer. They know where they can find dimensions, important things. Also, a good thing to do before we get too far into this is let's change some dimensions and see if this sketch updates the way we want it to. Because if the sketch doesn't update the way we want it to, then the part certainly isn't going to update either. It looks like, yep, all of my lines are still equidistant. Let me change this really quick to something and see, okay, yeah, that updated. Let's change the thickness here. No, not 98. Okay, everything looks like it's updating. So this is, again, test it early. That way you can catch an error before it becomes a big problem. So I'm going to go back through, and you know, I'll just leave these. I'll change them later. It's fine. All right, save. Now, because this box is 3-dimensional, I'm going to actually use another master sketch in another plane. That first master sketch gets me, you know, I guess in this part, like the red part and the yellow part, but I still need a sketch to help me define these 2 white parts. So let's set that up too. So I'm going to sketch in my right plane. And we're going to start with the same thing. We're going to start with a box. And this is where it starts to get a little interesting, because we can actually leverage some of the dimensions in the previous master sketch in this master sketch. So we know that this part is always going to be the same height as, you know, this other sketch. So I can add a relation here and a relation down here to make sure that this height is tied to the height of my other sketch. Got it? One thing I can't really change is, or tie to the other sketch, is the width of this. Well, I guess I could, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to give this its own dimension because this is a dimension that I might want to change manually later. So right now I'm going to say, yep, let's make it 100 millimeters wide. Okay, that's good. We can do another offset. But actually in this case, to make my life easier yet again, we know that this sketch, remember this inside square from our first master sketch, we set up as an offset, and we can change the dimension, and it will change the thickness of our material. I kind of want that one dimension to drive the thickness of all of our parts. So I'm going to actually pick the midpoint here, pick this line, and add a relation so that they're tied together. Same thing down here. I'm going to pick the midpoint, maybe pick the midpoint, oops, not that line. This line, add a pierce relation, and say it one more time.
So like the surrounding square, I guess, right? That's not linked to any
Right. Yeah, it's not linked to anything. You're talking about this inside square, right? Yeah, it's not linked to anything, but we're going to try and link it to as much as we can so that it does update when we change the dimension in our original master sketch. And you'll see how we're going to do that really quick too. So right now we have like this, the distance between these two lines is now attached to the distance between these two lines in our other sketch. So we know if we change the dimension here, it should update here. What we don't have a relation for yet is the distance between these two lines. Well, we know that material is usually uniform thickness. That's kind of what we're designing for. So there are a couple ways we could do it. We could do another one of these little, like, add a couple construction lines to kind of mock up where the dimensions are, and then say, always make this line the same length as that line. We're going to make them equal, right? We just tied them together. So we're forcing them to behave in a way that we want them to behave, all right? Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Right now, as a rule of thumb, like blue in a sketch means it's not fully defined. I don't care if these things move around because I'm not going to actually use them for anything other than making sure that the distance between these two lines is the same as the distance between these two lines. If I knew I was going to use them for something else, I might try and add a dimension, like make sure that this line stays a certain distance from the center. Okay, so we're close. We have, and we can test it. Let me get out of here really quick. I'm gonna name this sketch it's a second master sketch, but it's on the right plane of my box. I'm gonna save, and let's just see if things update the way we think. So if I change the height of my original sketch back to 100, cool. That second sketch also updated. That's good. That's what we want to see. The other thing I was gonna try is if I change the thickness of my material in my original sketch back to 6.35, does it link to the thickness in the second sketch? And it does. Again, this is also stuff like I'm not expecting you to get every single relation right the very first time you set something like this up, but this is a relatively simple box project, and it's a good thing for you to kind of struggle with over the next couple days to see if you can get it right. All right, let's keep going. So we're gonna go back into this second master sketch. Just kidding, I got into it and then got right back out of it. Also, you'll notice this is a lot more setup probably than most of you put in a lot of your initial sketches, and that's the point of a master sketch. We're going to put as much information as we can into our initial sketches so that when we start building parts, you'll see it'll go really, really quickly, and it can update. Okay, so we want to add some of these same little divider lines that we're going to use to make our fingers in this sketch too. So let's try the thing you were talking about, Eunice. Let's try to make a couple lines that go all the way across. Oops, that was not horizontal, or yeah. and see if we can trim it and get it to keep its relation, because that would be cool. I am kind of sketching, you know, at an angle just so I don't accidentally add relations to this other sketch in a way that's not something I wanted. Alright, so, you know, we'll try it this way again. So I'm going to do from here to that line, to that line, to that line, to that line with construction lines. I'm going to hold shift, click all of my construction lines here, and then set them equal to one another. Okay, now those lines are nice and even. I want them to stay here. I don't want them in the middle here. So let's try and trim them and see what happens. Trim, trim, trim. Yep, it kept them. Sometimes it works. And you'll see it added this little relation that says that's like a collinear relation. That's how you know that everything's going to stay lined up. So, nice. We'll see if it works in the other direction. It's not always a given. Alright, so we'll come all the way down. I am, when I'm making these lines, trying to make sure that I get I get both of those little yellow relations down at the bottom, the one that says I'm coincident and the one that says my line is nice and vertical. If it didn't happen, like, oh geez, that didn't work. If, for example, I made a line and did something like that, I could always either redraw the line or like trim it and add that vertical relation manually. Just something to watch for as you're building this stuff. Alright, so let's do the same thing here. You know what? Just for the sake of showing you guys one more time how to do it the other way, we're going to do that equation-driven line again. This distance we want to equal that dimension. I just clicked it, divided by 4. Okay. And now I'm going to do... it actually doesn't look right. Let's try that again. Maybe I just fat-fingered something. From here to here, I want to equal this dimension divided by 4. There we go. Same thing again, equals that dimension from here to here, equals that dimension. There we go, we got nice evenly spaced things. Let's try to trim. Boom, boom, boom. Cool. And it actually like moved the dimensions up. I might actually move them back down. Okay, so looks like all of the important lines are black in this sketch, which means I should be good to go. I'm going to get out of here and save. Okay, now we can start making some of these parts. So, why don't we start with this side. So, because I'm using a master sketch, and I want to make an extruded boss base to create one of the walls of this box, the first thing I'm going to do is actually create a brand new sketch on a plane that's parallel with my master sketch. So in this case, it's the front plane. So I'm going to pick front plane, make a new sketch. Then I'm going to convert entities. And because I want like every line from this original sketch, rather than like going around and picking individual lines, I can actually just pick the master sketch and say okay. And look at that, I've got all of my lines there. All right. Now because if you look at these parts, and let me, in this view, I'm going to actually turn off my sketches so you can kind of see. They kind of fit together like puzzle pieces, right? So I'm going to have to do some trimming in this sketch that I just created. And we're just going to start, like I'm in the sketch, I'm going to use this trim tool. By default, it's power trim. So I'm going to go and start like cutting lines. I'm going to like alternate so that I'm like building out this part. I guess I would trim the outside of this one, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside, inside. Got it? Alright, now I'm going to say extrude this sucker. One of the cool ways that you can use a master sketch again with an extrusion is rather than saying extrude from the sketch plane so many millimeters out in a direction, I can actually start at a vertex. In this case, I might start here where I want the part, to actually live, and then go up to another vertex. And in this case, I'm going to extrude up to like this material thickness. And then I can say, okay, there's my first part. Looks pretty crazy. Let's make another. All right. There are a couple ways that we could do this. If we wanted, we could do a mirror feature and say, I want to mirror this body across that front plane. So now I have, oh yeah, there's nothing to merge with, so I want to uncheck this merge solids box. There we go, and I've got a left side and a right side to my box. That's fine with me. Let's do one of these other parts. I'm going to save really quick because things are looking okay. Actually, why don't we do another test? I'm going to change the dimensions of something here just to make sure it updates. Let's go to 125. Okay, yeah, it looks like those notches like increased in size, so that's good. All right, let's make the front and back pieces now. All right, so because that's the sketch I want to base things off of, I'm going to sketch on a plane that's parallel to it, make a brand new sketch. I'm going to use this Convert Entities tool, find that sketch in my feature tree and just like move all of those lines over. Yes, you could go through and pick them all. I already said that. And now we got to do a little bit of thinking because we want to make sure however we trim this part, it matches up with these other two parts, right? And I guess I'm already seeing a problem here, but we're going to go through it anyway, and then we can make an adjustment. So it looks like these parts right here, I need this part to stick out. So when I'm trimming these entities, I'm going to get rid of these. This will interlock with this here. Let me like square up here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, this we want to stick out, that we want to come in, and we can just keep going around this part, except when we get over here, it looks like this also needs to be like trimmed in so that it locks up. Let's see. Okay, and on the top here, maybe we just cut this whole top thing out. All right, let's see. Oh yeah, I see that problem down here. I have like an extra line that's kind of extraneous. Oops. I'm going to trim this out so it's kind of a different shape piece here. You might have to mess around with like which areas you trim to make it work like a puzzle piece. All right, so I think that's going to work. Let's go ahead and make the extruded part. Same thing. I'm going to start at a vertex. In this case, like the far edge of my model. I'm going to go up to another vertex. In this case, like right there, like the thickness of my material from my original master sketch. I'm going to make sure merge result is turned off because I want these to stay separate pieces. Say OK. And see how those fit. Okay, it looks like it fits. Now, if it bothered you that like these aren't alternating, like we have an up, a down, and another up, there's a way that we could get around that. Do you want to see how we could get around that? Sure, let's see how we could get around that. Okay. We could keep going in the same method and do another piece on the other side that looks kind of the same. Or if you're like me and this would bother you, I'm just going to like delete this. And I'm going to delete this too. And I think because I want these like parts to alternate all the way around, I'm actually just gonna spin this piece around, because I think it's gonna give me a different pattern on the other side. Basically, like, instead of mirroring these guys, let me delete this feature too. I'm gonna do a circular pattern, and you'll see what the difference is here in a second. So I wonder if I can pick this line to go around. All right, it wants me to pick a body first. Yeah, that's the thing I want to pattern. What do I want to pattern around? That axis? No, it's not gonna let me pick that axis. All right, there's a bit of a setup I have to do first. I want an axis right there. Okay, let's try this again. Circular pattern. I want to pattern a body, this body, around that, the axis. Yes, okay. 180 degrees, halfway around. Fine. Okay, you guys see what happened? Now I have like alternating tooth patterns on this side. Big deal. Probably doesn't make any difference, but to me, whatever. Okay. So then we're just going to do the same darn thing again. I'm going to make a brand new sketch on my right plane. I'm going to convert all of the entities from that sketch. If this is repetitive and boring, well, it is repetitive and boring, but we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. All right, we're going to do some more trimming, and hopefully this time I can just quickly alternate my trims all the way around the outside. Oop. Okay, I do double check that like none of these lines accidentally turn blue. If they do, like click it, drag it around, and see if you can add a relation to kind of fix it. I've had that happen in the past. I'll just give you an example. Like, oh, that didn't actually change anything. Nope, that didn't change anything either. Okay, never mind. I can't break it, but if it breaks, you can fix it. We're going to do that same extruded base. We're going to start at a vertex. We're going to start, I mean, I can pick the sketch. We're going to go up to another vertex on that same sketch. Make sure I don't merge everything. And voila. Okay, cool. Alternating pattern instead of whatever. Save. Now I think I can probably do the same thing and pattern this sucker around to the other side using that same axis in the middle of my part. Let's just see if the teeth line up. Yeah, actually they do. Cool. Sometimes things work out better than you expect. All right, we're close. We're really close. Now all we have is the top and the bottom. I'm sure most of you guys can figure out how to do a top and a bottom, but we're going to do one really quick. All right, notice we didn't do a master sketch in this, I guess it would be the top plane. We could do a master sketch in the top plane, but we actually have all of the information we need to just go ahead and make a part that's going to update anyway. So this time, I'm going to sketch on like this top plane, like the very top of my box. Let's square up to it. And you can kind of see like we have all of these lines already there that we can convert and turn into our new sketch. So here we go. Let's see. That one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Let me just make sure. Yeah, that's right. I want my part to go in where it's gonna, and it doesn't matter if the lines that I'm converting are like on the same plane or not, because it's gonna, when I put them on my 2D sketch, it'll make them all line up. This part's real fun. You've never had more fun in SolidWorks? Not in your entire life. You've also never had more fun watching a YouTube video? I've never had more fun making a YouTube video. You guys are great. I'll be here all semester. You have to have some kind of a weird sense of humor about this. SolidWorks doesn't get that much more exciting. I guess the payoff is like when you go to adjust it and the box updates, and then you can just print another one and make it. Yeah, that's where it really pays off. All right, I'm just gonna keep going around the edges, picking stuff. So cool. We're so close. I could never do this with like a trackpad. Some of you guys are like trackpad masters. Okay. All right, for my sake, I'm gonna like turn off. Let me just like hide some of these parts really quick, just so I can make sure that my sketch actually looks correct. I don't have any holes or like overlapping lines. I'm just gonna like work my way around the outline here and make sure I don't have anything overlapping. Yeah, that looks good. Also notice when you're making like multiple solid bodies in a part, this magical solid bodies folder will open up, and that's a good way for you to just stay on top of the fact that you don't want these things to merge. Okay, so we've got our sketch. I'm going to use this sketch. This time I actually can start from the sketch plane because I sketched, right even with the top of this part. I am going to go up to a vertex. I'm going to pick this vertex in my original sketch, make sure I don't merge everything, and voila, there's our part. And maybe, okay, you could do the same thing on the other side, like sketch here and convert a bunch of these lines, or I think maybe because everything else mirrored so nicely, I'm just going to try that. I'm going to make another axis here, do another circular pattern of this body this time around, come on, let me pick the axis, fine, around that axis. I want it to go 180 degrees. Did it work? It did. Wonderful. Okay, so there's our box. I'm going to turn off like axis for now. All right, let me save. And now we double check some things. Now we see, like if I change this dimension, does my box update? Yeah, it did. And if I change like the width of this box, yeah, it updates. Okay, all right, so that's like 95% of it. The other things you want to add in this box, oh man, like hunched over in front of this thing. It doesn't get easier when you get older, guys. No, I'm just kidding. That's what old people say. I'm sorry, any old people who are watching this. We wanted to put a window in the front, so I'm going to actually go back to my original master sketch and add something new. In this case, a window for this thing, so I'm going to actually make it as an offset of that original thing again. Let's say it's like 25 millimeters in. Okay. I'm going to get out of my master sketch. Because I didn't mess with any lines that were in the original master sketch, nothing should have changed in my part, except I have this new like reference geometry in that original sketch, which I can now use to cut a hole. So let me just make a new sketch on my like front plane, which is cutting this part in half. I'm going to convert just that box I drew. Okay. And then I'm going to use it as a cut through all in both directions. Boom. Now I have a window in both of those parts. Cool. If I wanted to, I could fill it those corners. I think I did in the other model. Save. Let's see if that updates. So if I change this again to like 150, okay, the window grew also. Again, that's a nice thing that it just makes it easy. If I know I only want, this window frame to be 25 millimeters, it should be able to update when we change the part. Let me save that. Last but not least, we want a hole on, I guess, these two edges, these two faces for our Automata drive shaft to go through. So in this case, I can go back to that sketch in the right plane, and make a circle. I'm going to deliberately put it off center for now because there's a great way to make sure something is in the center of a rectangle. Anyone remember from like sketch class how you find the center of a rectangle? Diagonals, that's it. So we're going to use two center lines. Yes, center lines. Come on. Two like construction center lines, draw a diagonal between these corners, and where they meet in the middle is where I want the middle of this circle. So one at a time, I'm just gonna add a relationship there. I'm gonna pick the other line and the midpoint of my circle, make another relationship. Now, if I like click and drag this thing, see how it stays always in the middle of that face. I can give this a dimension. This dimension doesn't matter. Let's just call it 25 millimeters for now. Okay, so I have a circle that's in the middle of this rectangle, and if I change the dimensions of this rectangle, it stays in the middle of the rectangle. That's what I'm hoping for. So let me get out of this sketch. I'm going to make a brand new sketch on the right plane, convert that just that circle, and then make an extruded cut feature that goes through everything in both directions. Now I have a hole for my drive shaft, and the ultimate test is if I change dimensions on everything, and I'm just going to bring it all the way back down to the original dimensions for this project, 100 by 100 by 300. My window adjusted, the hole stayed in exactly the center of those faces, and all of my finger joints adjusted too. All right, so that's what we're shooting for. That's what you guys need to make for Friday. After Friday, you're going to use this as a basis to then build in the mechanical features of the paper automata that you build over the weekend. Please bring like double-sided tape and or like really good paper glue. Zip dry, if you don't have it, is the best paper glue in the world because it dries in like 5 seconds, and you can even put paper like edge to edge and it'll stick. Bring that with you on Friday so that you can put these things together. Cool. Any questions on this before I like stop the video anyway? Oh no, it wasn't recording. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was awful. Oh wait, do you guys want to say hi to YouTube? Hi YouTube, you're all famous.
Smash that like button.
Oh God, never. You have to, otherwise how are you going to get that first like?
That's like high-fiving yourself in public.